There's a moment in your life when you realize being nice isn't protecting you anymore. It's costing you respect. It's costing you time. And slowly, it's costing you yourself. You feel the shift coming. And that's the part you're afraid of. You know exactly what I'm talking about. That moment when you're about to speak your truth and something stops you. When you know what needs to happen, but you choose the safe path instead. When you see the line you need to cross, but you step back one more time. Every time you do that, a part of you fades. The part that knows you're capable of more. The part that sees through the games. The part that's done pretending. Machiavelli didn't teach people how to be evil. He taught them how to stop being naive. He saw the world without the filter of wishful thinking. He understood that power isn't given to those who wait politely. It's claimed by those who understand the game and play it without apology. This video is about crossing that line, the one most people see but never step over. It's about the version of yourself waiting on the other side, the one you think about when you're alone, the one who doesn't bend, the one who doesn't explain, the one who simply moves. You're afraid of that person, and we're going to examine why. Before we go deeper, I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments. I choose myself first. Number 1. Your mind already crossed the line. How many times have you won an argument that never happened? How many conversations have you replayed where you said exactly what needed to be said? How many situations have you walked through mentally, handling them perfectly, only to freeze when the real moment arrived? You rehearse strength constantly. You build scenarios where you're direct, clear, unshakable, where you draw lines and people respect them, where you move with certainty instead of doubt. But when reality shows up, you hesitate. You imagine saying no, but you say maybe. You imagine walking away, but you explain yourself instead. You imagine holding your ground, but you compromise. That gap between what you rehearse and what you actually do, that's where fear lives. Machiavelli knew that thinking like someone with power means nothing without action. Strategy without execution is just fantasy. Here's what's happening. Your mind has already crossed the line. You've already become that person mentally. You know what it looks like. You know what it feels like. You've practiced it 1,000 times, but you won't make it real. Because once you step into that energy in actual life, people will see the shift. They'll react. Some will adjust. Others will resist. Right now, you get to live in both worlds. You feel strong in your thoughts while staying safe in your actions. You get the mental satisfaction without the real consequences. But that's not power. That's preparation without delivery. Your mind is ahead of your body. Your thoughts have already made the move. You just haven't shown anyone else yet. And every time you rehearse mentally but act weakly, you reinforce a pattern. You tell yourself you're not ready. That may be tomorrow. But the gap isn't wide, it's just visible. The moment you take one action that matches the strength in your mind, everything changes. The rehearsal becomes reality. Stop waiting for the feeling of readiness. You'll never feel completely ready. You make the move, and readiness follows. Number 2. Your silence serves someone else. There are people in your life who need you to stay exactly as you are, not because they care deeply, but because your current version serves them. They benefit from your predictability, from your willingness to accommodate, from your habit of putting yourself second, from your silence when you should speak. They're not plotting against you, but unconsciously they've built their comfort around your compliance. Machiavelli watched this pattern everywhere. He saw how power structures depend on keeping certain people in certain positions, how systems collapse when someone breaks pattern. Your life operates the same way. not dramatically, but quietly. The person who only reaches out when they need something, they benefit from you being available. The one who makes decisions for you, they benefit from you not trusting yourself. The one who dismisses your ideas, they benefit from you doubting your voice. When you start to change, these dynamics shift, and people who were comfortable in the old structure will feel uncomfortable in the new one. Your growth threatens their balance, not because you're doing anything to them, but because you changing means they have to adjust, and most people resist adjustment. This is where most people stop. They feel the pushback and think they're doing something wrong. They wonder if they're being selfish. But Machiavelli would tell you, you're not scared of change. You're scared of conflict. You're scared of the resistance, the questions, the accusations of changing. That fear is real, because conflict is uncomfortable. Being misunderstood hurts. But staying small to avoid that pain, that's choosing their comfort over your life. Every time you shrink to keep the peace, you lose a piece of yourself. Growth costs something. It costs old patterns. It costs dynamics built on you being less. It costs the approval of people who only liked you because you didn't challenge them. But what you gain is yourself, the version that's been waiting beneath all the accommodation. So, if you're afraid of stepping into your power because of how others might react, understand this. Their discomfort is not your responsibility. Their adjustment is their work. Your growth is yours. Now, I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments. My growth matters most. Number 3, one move changes everything. You can study power forever. You can read about it, think about it, understand every principle. But power doesn't exist until it's visible. Machiavelli knew this completely. He didn't write about theory. He wrote about action, about making moves that people could witness. Because if people didn't see your power, you didn't have it. The same applies to you. You can have absolute clarity internally. You can know your worth. You can understand your boundaries. But if you never demonstrate it, nothing changes. This is where most people stay stuck. They build courage inside. They do the mental work. But when the moment comes, they wait. They tell themselves it's not the right time. They convince themselves one more day of preparation won't hurt, and months pass. Same place. Here's the shift. Power begins with one visible move, not a complete transformation, not 10 moves. One boundary you state clearly. One time you don't back down. One moment where you walk away without explaining. One instance where you choose yourself in front of others. That's the move. And once you make it, everything shifts. Because visibility locks identity. When people see you act differently, you can't pretend it didn't happen. You can't undo it. You can't go back to being the person who would have stayed silent. You've shown them who you're becoming. More importantly, you've shown yourself. This is why hesitation feels safer, because as long as you don't make the move, you can still retreat. But once you step into your power publicly, there's no reverse. The message is sent. And that's terrifying, because it means commitment. It means no more half in, half out. But it's also liberating, because the fear you've been carrying, it was never about the action. It was about the uncertainty of whether you'd actually do it. Once you do it, the uncertainty vanishes. The first move is the hardest. Your heart will race. Your mind will scream warnings. Every instinct will push you towards safety. But you have to push through. Because the first move is the hardest. The second is easier. By the third or fourth, it starts to feel natural. You realize the person you were afraid to become isn't dangerous. They're just someone who values themselves. Stop waiting for the perfect moment. You make the move, then you become ready. You set the boundary, then you learn to hold it. You walk away, then you learn to stand alone. You speak up, then you learn to handle the reaction. Machiavelli said, "It's better to act and risk failure than to do nothing and guarantee mediocrity." So what's your move? What's the one thing you've been avoiding because it would make your shift visible? Do that. Do it today. Do it scared, but do it. Number 4, firmness isn't violence. Here's where many people get blocked. They look at the idea of becoming more assertive, more direct, more powerful, and they think it means becoming cold. They think strength equals cruelty, and because they don't want to be cruel, they stay weak. Let me be direct. That's a false choice. Machiavelli had a reputation. People called him ruthless. They said he taught manipulation and deception. But here's what people miss. Machiavelli wasn't teaching cruelty. He was teaching control. He was teaching how to separate emotion from decision-making, how to act based on what's necessary, not what feels comfortable. That's not heartlessness. That's clarity. You can be kind and still have boundaries. You can care deeply and still say no. You can respect someone and still walk away if they're draining you. Strength isn't about shutting down your emotions. It's about not letting emotions control your decisions. Think about it this way. Someone keeps crossing your boundaries. They take your time for granted. They dismiss your needs. If you're emotionally driven, you might explode, or you might swallow it and build resentment. Either way, emotion is running the show. But if you're strong, you address it calmly. You set the boundary. You make the decision based on what's right for you. That's not cruel. That's powerful. And here's where the confusion enters. When you stop allowing people to take advantage, they'll call you cold. When you stop explaining yourself, they'll say you've changed. When you start choosing yourself, they'll accuse you of being selfish. But that's their discomfort speaking, not truth. You were taught wrong. You were taught that being firm means being unkind, that having standards means being harsh. But those are lies designed to keep you manageable. Real strength is knowing the difference between being harsh and being clear, between being mean and being honest. Machiavelli said a leader must be both loved and feared, and if forced to choose, fear is more reliable. But people misread that as advocating tyranny. He's saying don't let your desire to be liked make you weak. You can be respected without being cruel. And here's the critical shift. Not everyone deserves access to you. Your time, your energy, your attention, your mental space, those are valuable. And you get to decide who receives them. That's not selfish. That's self-respect. If someone drains you, you're allowed to create distance. If someone disrespects you, you're allowed to remove them from your space. Doing that doesn't make you bad. It makes you someone who values themselves. The fear is that if you start setting these boundaries, you'll lose your warmth. You'll become someone you don't recognize. But that's not what happens. What actually happens is you become more authentic. When you're not constantly bending to keep everyone else comfortable, you have space to show up as yourself. Strength and kindness aren't opposites. They're partners. You can be warm and still have limits. You can be generous and still protect your peace. So stop confusing strength with cruelty. It doesn't. It means using your heart wisely, giving it to people and situations that deserve it. Machiavelli valued control because he understood that people who act purely from emotion get destroyed. You're not trying to rule a kingdom, but you are trying to run your own life. And if you let guilt, fear, and people-pleasing control every decision, you'll lose. Be deliberate. Be clear. Be kind when it serves you and firm when it's needed. That's not cruelty. That's wisdom. Drop this affirmation in the comments. Strength protects my peace. Number 5. Comfort dies when you rise. This part is uncomfortable, but it's necessary. When you step into your power, you will lose something, not everything, but something specific. You'll lose a version of affection that only existed when you stayed small. Some people in your life care about you, but they care about the version of you that doesn't challenge them, the version that accommodates, the version that stays predictable. When you stop being that version, their affection shifts. Sometimes it disappears. And it's confusing, because you didn't do anything to them. You just grew. You just started valuing yourself. But to them, it feels threatening, because the dynamic was built on you staying in a certain role. And now you're stepping out of it. Machiavelli saw this pattern constantly. He watched people claim power and immediately lose allies, not because they became cruel, but because they stopped pretending. The same happens in your life. Not dramatically, but quietly. The person who felt important when you needed them constantly, they lose that role when you become self-sufficient. The person who felt superior when you doubted yourself, they lose that position when you trust your own judgment, and when they lose that, they pull back. This is the cost Machiavelli talked about. You can't gain power without losing comfort, and what you leave behind is the approval of people who needed you to stay down. Now here's the painful part. You'll miss it, even when you know it wasn't healthy. You'll miss the familiarity, the easy connection, and there will be moments when you question whether it was worth it. But here's what you need to understand. Affection that requires you to stay small isn't real support. Real support adjusts. Real support celebrates your growth. Real support might struggle with the change, but it doesn't punish you for it. If someone only showed you warmth when you were easy to manage, that wasn't genuine care. That was convenience. And losing convenience hurts. But it's not the same as losing something real. Machiavelli accepted this cost early. He knew that stepping into power meant stepping away from certain comforts, and he did it anyway, not because he didn't value connection, but because he valued truth more. That's the choice in front of you. You can keep the version of affection that requires you to stay the same. Or you can step into your power and see what remains. See who adjusts. See who stays. Yes, some people will leave. That's the truth. And it will hurt. But the ones who stay, those connections become stronger, because they're built on who you actually are. And the new people who enter your life, they'll meet the real you from the start. No masks, no performance. That's the exchange. You lose shallow affection and gain real respect. The transition is hard. There's a gap between losing the old and finding the new, a gap where you feel alone. But that gap doesn't last forever. And on the other side, you find something better. You find people who appreciate your strength, not just your flexibility. People who respect your boundaries instead of testing them. And you find yourself, the version that's been buried under years of trying to keep everyone else comfortable. So yes, you will lose a version of affection, and it will hurt, but what you gain is worth it. Drop this affirmation in the comments. Real support celebrates growth. Number 6. Silence becomes your filter. Real power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to prove anything. It just exists. And one of the clearest signs you've stepped into your power is this. You stop reacting to everything and start selecting where your energy goes. Most people live in reaction mode. Something happens, they respond immediately. Someone says something, they defend. A situation appears, they engage. It's automatic. We're wired to respond. But powerful people, they operate differently. They pause, they observe, they decide whether something deserves their energy before they give it. Machiavelli understood this completely. He watched leaders who tried to address every criticism, every rumor, every challenge. And he watched them exhaust themselves. But the leaders who endured, they were selective. They knew which battles mattered and which ones were just noise. That's the shift you need to make. Stop treating every comment, every situation, every provocation like it deserves equal weight. Because it doesn't. Some things deserve your full attention. Some things deserve a response. But most things, they deserve nothing. Not because you're being dismissive, but because engaging doesn't serve you. Think about it. Someone criticizes you. They say something designed to get under your skin. Old version of you would react immediately, defend, explain, prove them wrong. But powerful you? You pause. You ask, does this person's opinion actually matter? Is this worth my energy? And most of the time, the answer is no. So you don't respond. Not from fear, not because you can't, but because you choose not to. That's silence. That's power. When you don't react, you stay in control. You don't hand your peace to someone else. You observe, you assess, you select. This applies to everything, not just criticism. Situations you don't want to be part of. Conversations that don't serve you. Drama that has nothing to do with you. You start filtering. You start asking, does this align with who I'm becoming? Does this add value? Or is this just noise? And when it's noise, you let it pass. You don't engage. You don't explain. You just move on. Machiavelli said powerful people combine the strength of the lion with the wisdom of the fox. They have the capacity to engage when necessary, and the intelligence to stay silent when it's not. When you start living this way, people notice. They notice you're not as easy to provoke anymore, that you don't get pulled into every argument. Some people will respect that, but others? They'll test you harder. They'll push your buttons to see if you'll break. And that's when you really prove it. Because staying calm when someone's actively trying to provoke you, that's next-level power. You don't explain. You don't justify. You just hold your position and let them exhaust themselves. Eventually they stop. Because there's no reward. That's when you know you've made the shift. When you're no longer controlled by external triggers. When your energy is yours to give, not theirs to take. This doesn't mean you become cold. It doesn't mean you stop engaging with life. It means you stop engaging with what doesn't matter. It means you save your energy for what does. You engage deeply with people and situations that deserve it. And you let everything else fade into the background. That's the filter. And once you make it, your life gets quieter. Not because there's less happening, but because you're no longer giving attention to the noise. You're selective, deliberate, intentional, and that's what real power looks like. Number 7, commitment kills the fear. We're at the final piece. And this is the most critical part. Everything we've discussed, the mental rehearsals, the resistance from others, the visible moves, the confusion between strength and cruelty, the loss of conditional affection, the shift to selective engagement, all of it comes down to one thing: decision. The decision to become the person you're afraid to become. Because here's the truth, fear survives only in indecision. As long as you're halfway in and halfway out, as long as you're considering it but not committing, the fear will keep growing. It will whisper every day. It will show you worst-case scenarios. It will remind you of everything you might lose. It will keep you stuck in the gap between who you are and who you could be. And that gap? That's where anxiety lives. That's where self-doubt thrives. Because you're not fully one person or the other. You're in between. And in between is the hardest place to exist. Machiavelli understood this. He valued decisive identity. He said, half measures fail. The same applies to you. If you try to be both the old version and the new version simultaneously, you'll just be confused. You'll second-guess every move. You'll question every decision. But the moment you commit, the moment you decide fully, the fear dissolves. Not because the risk disappears, but because the uncertainty does. You're no longer wondering if you'll do it. You've done it. And once you're in, once you've made the full commitment, something shifts inside you. You stop fighting yourself. You stop going back and forth. You become calm, clear, focused, because you're not split anymore. You're whole. This is what people don't understand about fear. They think the fear is about the outcome, about what might happen if they change. But the fear isn't about the outcome. It's about the decision. It's about the moment when you stop considering and start committing. When you stop testing the water and just move forward. And yes, that moment is intense, because it's final, but it's also freeing, because once you make it, you don't have to keep making it. You've decided, and now you just execute. Machiavelli said, it's better to be bold and fail than to be timid and wonder. Because even if you step into your power and it doesn't go perfectly, you'll at least know. You'll have the answer. But if you stay stuck in indecision, you'll never know. You'll just wonder. And that wondering will follow you. So here's what you need to do. Stop halfway. Stop testing. Commit fully. Decide that you're becoming the person you're afraid to become, and then act like it. Set the boundary. Make the move. Walk away. Speak up. Choose yourself. Do it once. Do it completely. And don't look back. Because the moment you do, the fear loses its power. The uncertainty disappears, and the person you were afraid to become, they're just you now. And once you're living as that person, you'll realize it wasn't as frightening as you thought. The consequences weren't as severe as you imagined. This is the final piece, the commitment. Everything else builds to this. But without this, none of it matters. You have to decide, and you have to decide fully. Half change creates anxiety. Full commitment creates calm. So what's it going to be? Are you going to keep living in the gap, wondering what could happen? Or are you going to cross the line, commit fully, and find out? Drop this affirmation in the comments. I commit fully now. You are afraid because becoming that person ends negotiation. No more second chances for things that don't deserve them. No more over-explaining yourself to people who don't listen. No more shrinking to make others comfortable. The person you're afraid to become is the one who finally chooses himself. And once you do, there is no going back. There's no reverting to the version who stayed quiet, no returning to the life where everyone else came first. That door closes, and it should, because on the other side is the version of you that's been waiting, the one who doesn't apologize for existing, the one who moves with intention instead of fear, the one who understands that real power isn't about controlling others. It's about refusing to be controlled. Machiavelli didn't write about evil. He wrote about reality, about seeing the world as it is. And the reality is this: you've been playing small because it felt safe. But it's not protecting you anymore, it's limiting you. And somewhere deep down you know that. That's why you're here. That's why this resonates. That's why the fear feels so real. Because you're close. You're right at the edge. And all you have to do is step. So step. Become the person you're afraid to become. Not because they're perfect, not because they have everything figured out, but because they choose themselves. And that choice changes everything. If this video resonated with you, hit the like button right now. Share it with someone who needs to hear this message. And subscribe to the channel because we're just getting started with these truth-based conversations. Drop your affirmation in the comments. Let me know which point hit hardest. You've got this. Now go prove it.